The bitter wind howled across the plains as Fiona Barrett clutched her swollen belly, each step more painful than the last. Colorado Territory, 1872, unforgiving in the best of times. Deadly in winter to a woman 8 months with child and without a husband. Blood stained the hem of her threadbare dress, evidence of the beating that had driven her from the last town when they discovered her unwed state. "Please," she begged, her voice nearly lost in the wind as she approached the saloon in the small mining settlement of Silverwood. "I need somewhere to stay, just for the night." The men gathered on the porch laughed, their voices cruel in the gathering darkness. "Ain't no place here for fallen women," one called out, spitting tobacco juice that narrowly missed her boots. "Try the stables," another suggested, triggering more laughter. "Least there you'll be with the other animals." Fiona staggered back, tears freezing on her cheeks. 3 towns, 3 rejections. Her baby kicked fiercely, as if protesting their shared fate. Night was falling fast, and with it temperatures that would surely kill them both if she couldn't find shelter. "Move along," the barkeep growled from the doorway. "You're bad for business." She clutched her meager belongings tighter and stumbled down the muddy street. The last rays of sun disappeared behind the mountains as she reached the edge of town. A small cabin stood apart from the others, smoke curling from its chimney. Desperation drove her forward. Her knock was feeble, nearly drowned by the wind. When no answer came, she knocked again, harder this time, fear giving her strength. The door swung open. A tall man filled the frame, his face half hidden by a dark beard. His eyes, blue as summer sky, widened at the sight of her. "Please," Fiona whispered, swaying on her feet. "They wouldn't help me in town. I need." The man looked past her to the darkening landscape, then back to her trembling form. Without a word, he stepped aside. "Stay," he said simply. Fiona burst into tears as she crossed the threshold into blessed warmth. The man Cole Turner by name, she would soon learn, closed the door firmly against the night and its judgments. "Sit by the fire," he instructed, his voice low and rough as if unused to speaking. He moved with the easy grace of a man comfortable in his own skin, taking her threadbare coat and hanging it near the stove. Fiona sank into the offered chair, her body shaking with cold and relief. The cabin was small but neat, a single room with a bed in one corner, a table with 2 chairs, and a cooking area. Everything had its place. This was a man who lived alone but hadn't surrendered to disorder. "When did you last eat?" he asked, already moving to the stove where a pot simmered. "Yesterday morning," she admitted, watching as he ladled stew into a bowl. The smell made her dizzy with hunger. He placed the food before her with a chunk of bread. "Eat slowly." She managed small bites at first, fighting the urge to gulp it down. As warmth returned to her limbs, Fiona became acutely aware of her appearance: dirty dress, matted hair, the unmistakable evidence of her condition. "Thank you, Mr. Turner." Cole Turner. He sat across from her, his expression unreadable. "And you, Fiona Barrett." He nodded once. "Your husband." She tensed, fingers tightening around the spoon. "There isn't one." She waited for the judgment, the disgust, perhaps even an order to leave once the storm passed. Instead, he merely nodded again. "Finish your food, Miss Barrett. You can have the bed. I'll take the floor." "I couldn't possibly." "You can and will." His tone brooked no argument. "You need proper rest in your condition." Later, after he'd fashioned a pallet for himself near the stove and turned his back to allow her privacy to change into a clean shirt he'd offered, Fiona lay in the surprisingly comfortable bed and stared at the ceiling. The baby moved restlessly inside her. "Mr. Turner?" she whispered. "Yes," came his immediate reply. "Why did you help me when no one else would?" Silence stretched between them, punctuated by the crackling of the fire. "Get some sleep, Miss Barrett. Morning comes early out here." She woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Cole Turner moved quietly around his small domain, setting the table with 2 plates. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving a pristine blanket of snow. "Good morning," she said, sitting up carefully. He glanced over, nodded. "Breakfast is ready when you are." Fiona used the basin of water he'd left for her to wash her face and hands, then joined him at the table. The food was simple but plentiful, and she ate with genuine appetite. "The snow's deep," he commented. "Roads will be blocked for at least a day, maybe 2. She set down her fork. "I've imposed enough. Perhaps someone in town would—" "They won't." His bluntness wasn't unkind, merely factual. "And you shouldn't be traveling in your condition anyway. You can stay until after the baby comes." Fiona stared at him, speechless. "Mr. Turner, that could be weeks." "I couldn't possibly. You can. You will." He stood, collecting their empty plates. "I've got chores. Rest today. There are books on the shelf if you get bored." Before she could formulate a response, he had donned his coat and was out the door, leaving her alone in his cabin with his extraordinary offer hanging in the air between them. The day passed slowly. Fiona explored the small space, noting the carefully mended clothes, the small collection of books, mostly practical guides to farming and animal husbandry, but a few novels as well, dog-eared and obviously well-read. A photograph in a simple frame caught her attention. A younger Cole stood beside an older man with the same striking blue eyes. When Cole returned that evening, he brought armfuls of firewood and a sack of supplies. "I went into town," he explained, unpacking flour, sugar, coffee, and to her surprise a packet of dried apples and a tin of hard candies. "Thought you might have a sweet tooth." Her throat tightened. "That's very thoughtful. Please let me cook dinner. It's the least I can do." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right." They settled into an unexpected routine over the following days. Fiona took over the cooking and mending, grateful to be useful. Cole continued his work. She learned he raised horses on the small ranch surrounding the cabin but spent evenings inside rather than at the saloon as had been his habit. Their conversations were sparse at first. He asked no questions about her past, and she respected his privacy in turn. But gradually, in the long winter evenings, words began to flow more freely. "I came west 5 years ago," he told her one night as they sat by the fire. "After the war." Fiona nodded. Many men had sought new beginnings after the conflict that had torn the nation apart. "Were you in the fighting?" "Union cavalry." His eyes took on a faraway look. "Lost my brother at Gettysburg. Father passed 2 years later. Nothing left for me back in Pennsylvania." "I'm sorry." She hesitated, then added, "I came from Boston. After my parents died of the fever, I worked as a seamstress. Then I met someone. He made promises." Her hand drifted to her belly. "He disappeared when I told him about the baby." Cole's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "I thought I could find work out west," she continued. "But once my condition became obvious." She shrugged, the rejection of 3 towns still raw. "People can be cruel," Cole said simply. A week passed, then 2. January gave way to February, and Fiona's time grew closer. They developed a comfortable familiarity. She learned he took his coffee black but had a fondness for honey in his tea. He discovered she sang to herself while cooking, old songs her mother had taught her. One evening, returning from the barn, Cole brought in a piece of wood he'd been working on. It was a cradle, small and sturdy, the edges sanded smooth. "It's not fancy," he said gruffly, setting it down, "but it should serve." Fiona ran her fingers over the simple piece of furniture, tears welling in her eyes. "It's perfect. Thank you." Something shifted between them that night, an acknowledgement that her presence in his home had become more than temporary charity, that perhaps they were building something neither had expected. The following week brought a thaw, and with it visitors. Fiona was kneading bread dough when horses approached the cabin. Cole, who had been mending a bridle at the table, stood and moved to the window. "Trouble," he muttered. "Stay inside." She wiped her hands on her apron, one she'd sewn from fabric he'd brought from town, and moved to peek out. 3 men dismounted in the yard. She recognized one as the barkeep who'd turned her away. "Turner," called the lead rider, a heavy-set man with a sheriff's badge. "Need a word." Cole stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind him. Through the window, Fiona watched the tense exchange, though she couldn't hear the words. The men gestured toward the cabin several times. Cole stood with his arms crossed, his posture unyielding. Finally, the men remounted and rode away. When Cole returned inside, his expression was dark. "What did they want?" she asked. "Nothing important." He hung his hat on its peg. "How's that bread coming?" But later that night, after they'd eaten, he finally explained. "They wanted to know why I'm harboring an unwed mother. Said it reflects poorly on the town." His mouth twisted. "Sheriff Dawson suggested I should do right by you or send you on your way." Fiona's cheeks burned with humiliation. "I'm so sorry. I've brought trouble to your door." "You've brought nothing but good to this place," he countered, surprising her with his vehemence. "It was cold and empty before you came." Their eyes met across the table, and for the first time, Fiona allowed herself to acknowledge the warmth that had been growing between them, a feeling she'd been afraid to name. "Cole," she said softly, using his given name for the first time. "I don't know what will happen when the baby comes, but these weeks have been the best of my life," he finished for her. His hand reached across the table, tentative, and covered hers. "I don't care what they think in town. Care about you. Both of you." The baby chose that moment to kick vigorously, as if in response. Fiona laughed, then gasped as a sharp pain followed the movement. Cole was instantly alert. "What is it?" She pressed a hand to her side. "Just a twinge. The baby's been restless today." But as the evening progressed, the pains returned with increasing frequency. By midnight, there was no denying what was happening. "The baby's coming?" she whispered, gripping his hand as another contraction seized her. Cole's face paled, but his voice remained steady. "What do you need me to do?" "Hot water. Clean linens." She tried to smile through her fear, and perhaps a prayer or two. The night became a blur of pain and effort. Cole proved an unexpectedly capable assistant, following her instructions without question, offering support when she needed to walk, comfort when the pain became overwhelming. Dawn was breaking when the first cry of her child filled the cabin, a strong, indignant wail that brought tears to Fiona's eyes. "A girl," Cole announced, his voice thick with emotion as he wrapped the infant in a clean cloth. "A perfect little girl." He placed the tiny bundle in Fiona's arms, and she looked down into a red, squalling face that was the most beautiful sight she'd ever beheld. "Hello, Grace," she whispered, the name coming to her unbidden. "Welcome to the world." Cole sat beside them on the bed, his expression one of wonder. "She's magnificent. Would you like to hold her?" Fiona asked. His hands, capable with horses and tools, trembled slightly as he accepted the swaddled infant. The moment he cradled Grace against his chest, something in his face transformed, a softening, an opening that made Fiona's heart swell. "I never thought," he began, then stopped, overcome. Fiona reached out to touch his arm. "Neither did I." The days that followed were a haze of adjustment and discovery. Grace proved to be a good baby, nursing well and sleeping for mercifully long stretches. Cole was an attentive presence, bringing Fiona food, ensuring she rested, watching over them both with a protectiveness that went beyond mere duty. 2 weeks after Grace's birth, Fiona sat in the rocking chair Cole had surprised her with, nursing the baby in the golden afternoon light. He entered from outside, stamping snow from his boots. "Rider coming," he said. "Looks like Reverend Simmons." Fiona adjusted her shawl to cover herself and the baby. What could he want? The knock came moments later. Cole opened the door to reveal a thin man in clerical black, his expression grave. "Mr. Turner, Miss Barrett." He removed his hat. "May I come in?" Cole hesitated, then stepped aside. The Reverend entered, his gaze immediately going to Fiona and the baby. "I've come on behalf of the town council," he began without preamble. "There has been considerable discussion about your situation." Fiona felt herself tense. Grace, sensing her mother's distress, began to fuss. "Get to the point, Reverend," Cole said, his voice deceptively calm. "Very well." The clergyman cleared his throat. "The council feels that your living arrangements are inappropriate. A man and woman unwed with a child, it sets a poor example. They've instructed me to insist that you either legitimize this union or the young woman must seek accommodation elsewhere." Fiona's heart sank. "After everything, to face rejection again, fine," Cole said abruptly. "We'll marry." The Reverend blinked, clearly surprised by the easy capitulation. "You will?" "Yes." Cole looked at Fiona, his expression softening. "If she'll have me." Fiona stared at him, shocked. "Cole, you don't have to. I want to." He crossed to kneel beside her chair, his blue eyes earnest. "I've been trying to find the right words for days. I love you, Fiona. You and Grace. I want us to be a family properly. I'm not offering out of obligation." Tears filled her eyes. "Are you certain? A woman with another man's child." "Grace is a blessing," he said firmly. "And you." His rough hand cupped her cheek. "You brought life back to this place. To me." The Reverend cleared his throat awkwardly. "Shall I return tomorrow to perform the ceremony?" Fiona couldn't look away from Cole's face, from the hope and love she saw there. "Yes," she said, her voice strengthening. "Yes to both of you." They were married the next day in the cabin, with Grace sleeping peacefully in her cradle. The ceremony was brief, the Reverend clearly uncomfortable but performing his duty nonetheless. No one from town attended, but neither Fiona nor Cole cared. "I, Cole, take you, Fiona, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his voice steady and sure as he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, another surprise he'd prepared without her knowledge. "I, Fiona, take you, Cole, to be my lawfully wedded husband," she replied, her heart so full she thought it might burst. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, Cole's kiss was gentle, but possessed a promise that made her cheeks flush. That evening, after Grace had been fed and settled in her cradle, they sat together before the fire, Fiona leaning against Cole's solid chest, his arms around her. "Mrs. Turner," he murmured against her hair, "has a nice sound to it." She smiled, turning to look up at him. "It does. Though I suspect some in town will still talk." "Let them." He traced the curve of her cheek with his fingertip. "What matters is right here." Spring came to the mountains, bringing wildflowers and new beginnings. Cole expanded the cabin, adding a proper bedroom for them and a small nursery for Grace. The garden Fiona planted flourished under her care, just as their small family bloomed in the warmth of their shared love. Gradually, attitudes in town began to shift. Cole's steadfast defense of his wife and daughter earned reluctant respect. Fiona's kind nature and willingness to help others mending clothes, sharing garden produce, eventually assisting the doctor when influenza swept through the settlement slowly won over even the most judgmental residents. By Grace's first birthday, several women from town attended the small celebration Fiona organized. They brought gifts and stayed for cake, cooing over the dark-haired little girl who had her mother's green eyes and her adoptive father's ready smile. "She's walking early," Mrs. Peterson observed as Grace tottered between Fiona and Cole. "Strong little thing." "Like her mother?" Cole said proudly, catching Grace as she stumbled into his arms. Later that night, after their guests had gone and Grace slept soundly, Fiona and Cole sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked, her head on his shoulder. "A year ago, I mean." He was quiet for a moment, his arms secure around her waist. "No. I'd resigned myself to solitude. Then you knocked on my door." His voice softened. "Best decision I ever made," saying that one word. "Stay," she whispered, remembering. "And you did." He turned to kiss her, tenderly at first, then with deepening passion. When they broke apart, both breathless, Fiona smiled against his lips. "I have something to tell you." His expression grew concerned. "Is everything all right?" She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "More than all right. By winter, Grace will have a brother or sister." Joy transformed his features. "Truly." She nodded, laughing as he lifted her from the bench and spun her around. "Careful," she protested through her giggles. "The baby." He set her down gently, then dropped to his knees before her, pressing his face against her still flat abdomen. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "We're already waiting for you." Fiona ran her fingers through his hair, her heart overflowing. From desperation to joy, from rejection to belonging, the journey had been unexpected but perfect in its way. In December, as snow blanketed the expanded ranch that now boasted a proper barn and additional pasture, their son was born. Cole Turner Jr. arrived with his father's blue eyes and a powerful set of lungs. "He's going to be a talker," Cole Sr. predicted, holding his son with the confidence of a man who'd learned fatherhood through love rather than blood. Grace, now an active toddler, peered at her brother with solemn curiosity. "Baby?" she declared, reaching out to touch his tiny hand. "That's right, sweetheart," Fiona said, watching her family with contented exhaustion. "Your baby brother." The years that followed brought more children: twin girls, Margaret and Louise, in 1875, and another boy, Samuel, in 1878. The Turner Ranch prospered, expanding to include cattle as well as the horses Cole bred and trained. Fiona established a small school in one of the outbuildings, teaching not only her own children but several others from outlying farms. Silverwood grew from a mining settlement to a proper town with a church, school, and even a small hotel. Cole served 2 terms as mayor, his fairness and integrity earning him the respect of even former detractors. On cold winter nights, when all 5 children were tucked into their beds in the large house that had replaced the original cabin, Cole and Fiona often reminisced about that first meeting. She desperate and alone, he solitary and withdrawn. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked once. "Taking in a pregnant stranger?" He gathered her close, his beard now streaked with silver but his eyes as blue and clear as the day they'd met. "Not for a single moment. You saved me as much as I saved you." "We saved each other," she corrected, kissing him softly. In 1897, on their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire town gathered to celebrate. Grace, now a poised young woman of 25 herself and recently married to the local doctor, raised a toast to her parents. "To the man who opened his door and his heart," she said, her eyes shining, "and to the woman brave enough to knock. Your love has been the foundation of not just our family, but this community." As applause filled the town hall, Cole leaned close to whisper in Fiona's ear. "Remember what I said that first night?" She smiled, the years having only deepened her love for this good, steadfast man. "Stay." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. "Best word I ever spoke." Under the stars that night, they walked home arm in arm, their grown children and grandchildren following behind. The path from town to the Turner Ranch was well-worn now, a testament to the life they'd built together from that single act of kindness in a snowstorm. "I would choose you again," Fiona said softly, 1,000 times over. Cole stopped, turning to face her. In the moonlight, she could still see the young horseman who had saved her, beneath the lines experience had etched on his beloved face. "And I you," he replied, bending to kiss her with the tenderness of a love tested by time and found unbreakable. "Every day, I choose you anew." Around them, the Colorado night wrapped them in its vastness, the same stars witnessing their love that had shone on that desperate night when a pregnant woman begged for shelter, and a lonely cowboy found the courage to say the word that would change both their lives forever. "Stay," he had said, and love had answered.